All right, my man, Vivek, man, the man with the plan.
Good to see you guys.
Everybody's been
Awesome.
looking for,
It's good
man.
to
I love
again.
being here
It's
in
great to
person
see
with
you.
you
Yes,
guys.
sir.
It's good to see you,
Love
man.
being with you.
Thank you.
Man, I'll never forget the first day we reacted to him when he cooked Don Lemon.
Man,
Was that the first day?
That's the first time we saw you.
ever heard or
And
saw
we
you
were like,
anything.
whoa.
We didn't react
Yeah.
to it. I was like, in the points you were making, I was like, how could you argue with that?
Say,
Like,
these
I
guys
can't
on
you
fire.
not argue with that.
I mean, you know, I think that people have been walking on eggshells for a long time. And my view is crush eggshells if you need to, right? Just speak the truth. Don't apologize for it. That doesn't mean I'm always right, but speak the truth, at least what your true belief is.
Right.
And that's the best we can do. So I'm trying to do that. I appreciate that. Ever since I don't know if it was that one, but maybe one of the more recent ones when I started seeing you guys. They're kind of fun the way you do those little the little format. And so
Yes,
my
sir.
parents watch you guys now.
That's
The last
awesome.
It's
one was
fun.
the guy Chris on News Nation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Chris
yeah,
Cuomo.
yeah,
That was the
yeah,
last one we did. That
yeah.
one was hilarious.
Yeah, we had one of those last
I
night
don't know
on
what you've
CNN
been
too.
Yes, no, I got a question about
That had
that.
me laughing so
This
long.
media, I mean, the media it's a funny thing, and I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing because 20 years from now, the existing cable news networks with the 2-minute segments, it's just not going to exist.
Right.
But actually, it's a special opportunity for you guys now to come up in a world where you get to almost see the caricature of that and call that out.
Yeah.
Versus 20 years from now, it's just going to be this,
Yeah.
actually. And so,
Yeah, that makes sense.
anyway, it's good to be here with you guys.
Definitely.
Excited.
So I just got a general question for you, man. So it seems like you are everywhere, always doing something. Like you have some of the most grind I've seen, like from anyone. Like
I appreciate
even
that.
like Joe Biden. Like I don't see him going around anywhere. He's the whole president. I think he's just in the house most of the day.
He's-
Before the
yeah,
debate,
he's
you see him
chilling.
everywhere. So like. Do you think it's how you were raised, or what kind of gave you that grit and that grind, that ability to just be so disciplined, have so much perseverance?
I would say this is if it feels like work, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because even the most disciplined person, if it feels like work, you're not actually going to do it. But if you're following something that you truly believe is, I wouldn't call it pleasure, right? I mean, like, would I rather be eating a piece of apple pie and some ice cream at any given moment? Sure. But like that's not what we're talking about as pleasure. But if something that has purpose to it, then at least for me, my reserve of energy for it is infinite.
Okay.
Literally infinite. And I don't think that's just me. I think that's true of everybody. And so then for me, I think one of the keys then is finding, okay, you might be passionate about something, but you don't have an innate skill set for it.
Yeah.
I wished I would have played in the NBA. That was I used to play in the basketball team growing up, but it wasn't in the cards for me. Okay. But so then there's this challenge of both finding something that you think is worthy and something that has a purpose, but then also asking yourself, what are the unique God-given gifts that I have from God? And each of us has it. You each have your own unique God-given gift. And then you say, okay, how am I using that in a way that's meaningful and purposeful? Once I get that down, there is no limit to the amount of energy that I will put to getting that job and seeing it through. And so, yeah, we don't do something half-hearted. I've been in phases of my life in the past where if you're in a position where you're kind of put there, you kind of have to half-ass it a little bit. And in those situations, I was not wired the way that I am now. But for most of my career, and that'd be the advice I'd give. You're not asking for my advice, but what I'd give to young people is in the first phase of your career. I mean, you guys are in your early 20s. In my early 20s, I didn't know exactly what my match would be for what my actual long-run passions are, what my even actual skill sets are. And so in your early phase of your career, maybe take your career in 2 to 3 year increments. Mm-hmm. Like think of it as a chapter. You can always renew the contract, but make it a contract with yourself that it's just like a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract. So you get to try a bunch of different things. But when you find what that actually is that galvanizes your sense of purpose, then I don't think that it feels like work and you're going to achieve whatever you want because you're going to want to do more of that work anyway because it doesn't feel like it. So anyway, for me right now, yeah, we're going 100-hour a week
Wow.
campaign.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I
easily.
can
It's
tell.
24/7.
I can
Wow.
tell.
Like every time
You're
we
a beast.
look up,
But I love it actually,
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
I feel motivated by purpose.
Because when we
That's
went
awesome.
to Eagle Pass, bro, literally the same day, I think the same night you were doing something. I was
Man,
like,
I know. I was like, wow.
I'm tired.
Yeah, he's a beast. Yeah.
Vivek not tired.
Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
no.
I appreciate that.
Okay. And then, so I have a question a little bit. So I feel like a lot of the times recently with everything going on in the Middle East, everyone's kind of been pointing fingers. He started it. He's wrong, they're wrong. I want to know, what a lot of people aren't talking about is, what do you think is the solution for peace?
Well, here's my view: is I'm not running for Secretary General of the UN.
Yeah.
I'm not running for President of the world.
yeah,
I'm running for a narrowly scoped position called the President of the United States.
yeah,
So let me rewind back a step. I'm a father of two sons. One of them's with me in Texas. I'll see him right after this interview, and we're going to go to the airport. We'll go to Iowa we got 2 events tonight in Iowa. We'll take him to those events, right? And that's what that day looks like. But as a father, my moral obligation is to my family.
Right.
Period. There's no ifs, ands, and buts
Yeah.
about it. So now, what is my moral obligation as U.S. president, or at least the position I'm running to be U.S. president? My moral obligation is to U.S. citizens here at home.
Right.
And so I don't think it's our job to try to ask the question of who in some other part of the world is on the right and wrong side, and what do we do to adjudicate somebody else's conflict. I think the best thing we can do is to stand for the autonomy of other nations at the UN or otherwise, but let other nations put their interests first. That's their job to do that.
yeah.
But my job as the leader of this nation is to put the interests of Americans first. And I think that brings a level of moral clarity to your moral obligations. And the other thing I will say is, if you stop doing that, that's the path to World War III.
Yeah.
Because then people are unclear about what your red lines are, right? So if everybody knows, our friends, our adversaries, and our fellow citizens here at home know that I'll lead this country where that's my sole moral obligation, well, then it's credible, right? That's believable. And so I say, we draw a red line, you don't mess with us here, but if you do that, well, we may not like it, but we're not going to militarily intervene. Then people know what those red lines are, and they're able to make their decisions accordingly.
Yeah.
But world war, when it comes up, world war is not in the interest of any one country. So how do you end up in world war? You end up in world war when you have vague red lines, and you accidentally tripwire and cross yourself into it because people were not honest about what their obligations were in the first place. So I'm honest. The sole obligation of any U.S. policymaker, especially the U.S. president, is to Americans here in the homeland, period. And that includes all Americans,
Yes, sir.
not just the ones who support you, but all Americans. But that's the way I look at international relations.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's kind of what
like that
Candace
answer
Owens
a lot.
basically said in that interview also. She was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
I think that's especially from America's perspective, that's the only answer, right?
Yeah.
Because
It's the only moral answer.
otherwise it's gonna be like
Yeah.
it's war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
thank you for that, man. Thank
That's my view.
you. Yeah.
And there's other people in the Republican Party. I mean, this is what I'm sharing with you is was not a welcome view on the debate stage. Did you guys
Yeah.
watch the third debate?
Yeah,
We did.
That's
We
what I
did.
was going to basically
Okay.
say. Like
Yes,
that,
sir.
I've found like Republican.
A lot of people were picking sides, like, we
that's
need to
why
go to war.
I just
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
to know,
Like
what you thought
saying
about
bomb
that.
Iran and things like
Yeah,
that.
that
Totally.
doesn't make sense. To me.
Doesn't make any sense.
Another thing I want to say about that, I think a thing a lot of the Republican candidates were doing that you didn't do, they were kind of like just repeating things that we're seeing in the mainstream media. And like, I think that's what draws a lot of Americans to you is like, you don't repeat like what is being said and you kind of speak the truth. And I like that. And I saw last night on CNN, a reporter try to bait you into saying something bad on Trump with one of his old clips, rather than like addressing real things, like you said in China, how they cleaned up San Francisco.
That was insane.
For the Chinese leader, but not its own residents.
Isn't that amazing? Just to think about that for a second, because I mean, San Francisco at its heyday, I mean, it's a beautifully situated place, a lot of history to it. I don't know if you guys have been there recently. I used to go there every year for my job, since I graduated from college in 2007, to watch the decline of this city into a third world status.
It looks like a jungle
has been
out there.
sad. It really does. And yet, in a matter of a couple weeks, it turns out the governor of California knows how to clean it up. He just hasn't been doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's just paltry
That's scary.
Americans here. Why would we care about that? But the Chinese,
that's like-
Chinese president's coming. The leader of the Chinese Communist Party's coming. Let's roll out the red carpet. And by the way, one thing you guys should watch the videos on that. there was all Chinese flags lining the street.
I
There
saw
wasn't
that.
one,
Yeah.
there was not one American flag.
I saw that.
That makes no
where-
sense to me.
Makes no sense.
That's pretty crazy.
Well, it makes some sense to me, but this is deeper. I think there's deeper issues at work where Gavin Newsom's plotting for his own future in the relationship between California and the CCP.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I think that's a whole separate discussion for another day. But we know how to fix the problems, right? So
Yeah.
imagine if every city in this country did what Gavin Newsom did for San Francisco to prepare for Xi Jinping's visit. Our cities would have a renaissance
Man, it would
again.
look so
Like
much
Flint,
better.
Michigan, the water. Do
Yeah.
they still
It's
not have water there?
unbelievable.
It seems like-
it's unbelievable. I've been to Flint, and it's
Yeah.
a scarred community for that same reason of being neglected. And so, I don't think it's that complicated.
Definitely, and I think what you just said about how they had the ability to clean it this whole time says what it's like a big shines a light on the leadership that we're having in this country. He's kind of like has the ability to do things and not doing them, getting them done. And I saw that Candace Owens was pointing out like some hypocrisy in Nikki Haley, and I saw she was like coming at you saying that you have a woman problem because you keep pointing out a lot of the things that she's caused problem to, and she's doing it in her own backyard and things like that. And I saw Candace said that she is only interested in who's going to give her the contract. And do you think that's why the media is like propping her up as like their darling right now?
I do think so. I think there's a deeper set of forces. I appreciate Candace because she's honest, and she is somebody who is one of the few people who's left who's actually unafraid to just say what she thinks.
Definitely.
Without calculating the consequences. So, I think that Candace is among the few in the media who's willing to call out Nikki. Now, look at the irony of Nikki is she'll claim she's against wokeness and identity politics and everything else. Actually, I haven't told the story, but a few years ago, first time I ever met Nikki Haley was when she reached out to me proactively.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I was writing the book Woke Inc., and that was getting some buzz around the time, and that ended up being a best-selling book. But before it came out, it just shows how calculated these people are. She okay, this guy's could be in the future. Got my plan to run for president. Deputize the team to say I want to talk to him.
Wow.
And it was a very. I'm minding my business writing a book, and so this person wants to talk. Sure, yeah, I'll have a Zoom call with her. So we get on a Zoom call, and it's very. It's like a two-dimensional politician you're talking to, but it shows how calculating you are. But that was her talking about how she doesn't like identity politics, and that's why she likes everything I'm saying. Now she's running for president. We'll say, okay, she's got corruption in her family I could go into the details of it, probably bore you guys. Somebody comes out of the UN in debt.
Wow.
Suddenly they end up a multimillionaire, and they become a military contractor on the board of Boeing and secretive speeches to foreign actors in the meantime. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out how that one happened.
Wow.
But to point out that criticism, or, as I did on the debate stage, point out the criticism of Romney McDaniel, who has, since she took over in 2017, imagine if you're an NFL coach, lose in 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2023,
fired.
and somehow says that but instead, you know what happened in her case? Her salary tripled. Or you got Kristen
Wow.
Welker at NBC News, who has been lying to her viewers for the longest time about the Trump-Russia collusion hoax and the Hunter Biden laptop. Yes, I called out all three of those things on the debate stage.
You did.
So what does
It
she
was
do?
awesome.
The person who's against identity politics? Wield identity politics and say I'm sexist because those happen to be three women. I actually
Wow.
criticize a lot of men too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's designed to do, especially in this environment. As a man, you're supposed to shut up, sit down, and do as you're told, and make sure that you apologize for whatever sins of the past. That's a left-wing view.
It is.
But when the
Definitely.
Republicans, Nikki Haley is of the world. She'll do whatever's required, but will, to advance her line her own pocketbook. But is wielding that same currency, it shows how hypocritical these people, even in the Republican Party, are. Yeah. And I'm not gonna cower in fear and back down, man. And keep speaking the truth.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've been
And
realizing
that's
how
what I
dirty
like
of a
you.
game politics is.
Oh, it's
Definitely.
disgusting.
Man.
And speaking of hypocrisy, last thing on Nikki Haley, she was calling for like all social media accounts to be verified with their own name, and I saw Tucker Carlson said her name's not Nikki, so I googled that. I did not know her name was Nimrata.
We were shocked.
I was shocked. Like I had no idea.
That was hilarious.
It's crazy.
If I'm running for political office, probably my name's Vivek Ramaswamy. They would have said change your name to Vic or Vicky. I could have done that too, but it's just the fakery of it is laughable. All these people all these politicians, 99% of them they're stooges for the people who prop them up.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the Republican establishment machine, it's broken. It's time to break that machinery and rebuild from scratch. And, I think that a lot of people are going to call you a lot of names along the way when you call them out. It's not going to stop me. Ronna McDaniel, the chairwoman of the RNC, get this. So this is reportedly from people who are sitting in her row at the debate. She's the host of the debate, the RNC is. She's booing me then while I'm speaking. And she says that the RNC, Republican National Committee, is not going to give me another cent. Now think about that. That means it's somebody treating this donor money that's gone to the party as though it's her money.
Yeah.
It's like a squatter that gets like in a rent-controlled apartment. There's a squatter who won't leave and think they own the place. That's the corrupt nature of these political creatures who are controlling both political parties, frankly. And it's going to take an outsider to solve it. And you know what? It's up to the people of this country. If the people like it, I'll succeed, and I'm willing to serve for a couple of terms. And if not, I hope the country finds better people to serve, because I don't see that happening from the existing breed of politicians.
Yeah, I think you're exposing a lot of things.
I think so.
That story you told, that shows a lot of entitlement that those
Oh,
people
yeah.
have.
Oh yeah, for
Like,
sure.
this is my money, so I don't like you.
And who the heck are you, as
like,
some young buck coming in? You haven't earned your stripes in politics.
That's
You're not supposed to be
kinda
talking about the stuff you're
scary.
talking about.
Crazy. They're
People
trying to
who
silence you.
Are
Do you-
leading us.
Do you think
Totally.
that do you think like that and like how Nikki was calling for all accounts to be like verified?
Oh, I forgot to
do you
mention
think
that, yeah.
is a violation of your 1A?
Of course it is. I mean, so the founding fathers of this country, they wrote under pseudonym. I mean, because there was a threat of tyranny, and you need to be able to say certain things. So
Wow.
Thomas Paine, or even think about the Federalist Papers that explained the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, James Madison. They wrote under pseudonym. Those three wrote under one collective pseudonym called Publius.
Wow.
Wow.
That's part of the American tradition, is that under times of stress, when freedoms are put under the stress as they are today, you need people to speak the truth. They need to be able to do it where the words can stand in their own right without somebody saying you're an insurrectionist or a domestic terrorist or a bioterrorist or a denier or a racist or a xenophobe or whatever. To be able to say the ideas deserve to stand on their own without regard to the government penalizing me because they don't like me. Nikki Haley, I mean, this is disqualifying not just from being U.S. president. This is disqualifying from coming spitting distance of any public position at the federal level. To say that the government, on her classic example, after 9/11 it started, national security grounds, has to be able to, if you're writing on the internet, verify yourself with your actual name. Apparently, as long as you're not Nikki Haley, they're fine. But everybody else has to play by that same set of rules. And that's also one of the problems with the people who are in charge in both parties, right? It's rules for thee, not for me.
Entitlement.
But she
crazy.
says she wants to ban lobbying. Well, guess who's propping her up is a bunch of lobbyists, right?
Yeah.
Rules for thee, not for me. That's the answer for the people who are grown up in this broken system. Democrats and Republicans equally bad. And, I think it's going to be your generation. I hope it's your generation where there's more leaders who step up that haven't been tainted by this yet to say we're going to do things differently.
That's awesome. I hope so too.
Well, I'm going to go with my two questions. So one of my questions, this is actually, I posted on the community page on YouTube, the subscribers wanted this question. So they said, do you have any plans to improve the VA for veterans?
Yes, is the answer to that question. It's not just the VA. Let's look at comprehensively care of veterans in this country. It's sad, actually. I mean, they used to about 20 some odd veterans commit suicide per day. Now that number's closer to 40 something.
Wow.
Wait.
Wow.
Per
day. About upwards of 40 veterans per day are committing
America.
suicide in the
did
United
not
States
know
of
that.
America.
That's
And
bad.
people don't talk about that.
People don't talk about that at all.
This is my first time even hearing this.
Yeah,
in
me
my
We'd
too.
rather be
life.
talking about a bunch of
pretty crazy.
kleptocrats in Ukraine that we allowed to buy a bigger
Literally.
house with our taxpayer money.
Wow.
That's
So these are our
crazy.
own veterans who've chosen to make a sacrifice for this country. So there's some basic things we can do. What I'm about to say is not fancy. It's not going to make front page headlines, but it's basic. One of the sources of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which many veterans suffer from, it goes down dramatically if you have a decompression buffer. So if you come from combat and you just allow somebody to have a 3-week period where they get acclimated before you just throw them back to civilian life, that's extremely helpful. Now, a lot of veterans don't report their PTSD because they might be assigned a red flag. Okay, so that's, if they want to possess a firearm or anything else in the future, they could be tagged with the red flag.
Oh, wow.
We need privacy restrictions that at least allow them the freedom to say, hey, this is what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Now, after you get out, you're thinking about the treatment of PTSD through the VA system. I think that veterans who suffer from PTSD, and this is controversial, but I stand by it, should have the right to certain Schedule I substances, ayahuasca, ketamine, psilocybin. Those are, I think, viable alternatives available to veterans to fentanyl or suicide, which they're choosing today. For people who have served this country, medical choice should be paramount. A lot of veterans have to go drive 60, 70 miles to find the nearest VA. That's really hard if you need to get healthcare on a regular basis. through the VA, you should still be able to get community medical care for a doctor who's closer to you. So, like I said, none of this is sort of front page headline grabbing stuff, but it's part of a basic plan to stand for our veterans. And so the model I think about, I've been a CEO of a company. I know how public companies work. The board of directors and the CEO is accountable to the shareholders. I want to bring that model to the VA where we start thinking of the veterans as the shareholders of the VA.
Yeah.
So then you actually have accountability where it's missing today. Now the VA sits in this bureaucratic morass with no accountability. Direct accountability to the veterans, like a company is to its stockholders. Think of the veterans as the stockholders of the VA. And that'd be the model that I would bring to bear.
Wow. Yeah.
Both of my grandpas are veterans. And
Yeah, my grandpa's a veteran
they're
as well.
going through some things.
Yeah,
Thank,
he's in
thank both
Oklahoma.
of them, all three of them, for their service. I appreciate
Yes,
that.
sir. Thank you.
So another subscriber said, here's the question. What is your view on raising minimum wage?
So I think that wages need to go up in this country, but the way it's going to go up is through actual economic growth. The federal minimum wage ends up, history teaches us, creating the inverse problem where you then have people who want to get work and would work for a cent lower than that, but are unable to, and so then you end up having greater unemployment as a result. So we don't want to keep swinging that pendulum back and forth. Wages go up when A, the economy is growing, and B, here's why wages haven't gone up. You want to get to the dirty little secret behind this? It's a little complicated, but I'll give you the short version of it. If I start boring you, let me know. Is the Fed, actually the U.S. Federal Reserve. So this is a dirty little secret people don't really talk about, but it's actually, if you want to talk about what matters for wage growth, this is what matters. The Fed has, for the last 25 years, or since 1997 or so, it's these academics that have taken over the Fed, that have adopted the premise that any wage growth is a leading indicator of inflation, which means they have to tighten monetary policy, which is, take dollars out of the market or raise interest rates, tighten monetary policy when those wages grow up. So they treat wage growth as a bad thing. So every time wages grow up, you have an entire Federal Reserve playing whack-a-mole. So it's no surprise that on inflation-adjusted terms, real wage growth has been flat for the last 25 years. It's exactly what our Federal Reserve solves for. Now, this will be a tad more complicated, but if you stay with me, I think it's an interesting point to see. Anybody who's been in the business world, I've been a CEO, knows that you go through these business cycles, but wages are the last thing to go up in a business cycle. So now if you've got the U.S. Fed that says, oh, we're going to treat that as a leading indicator of inflation and tighten monetary policy, what they're actually doing is they're tightening monetary policy right at the top of the business cycle, which gives us busts. So you get the boom, the bust, and then what comes after the bust is a bailout. That's what happened in 2008. Some degree, that's what happened this year in 2023. So it's a long way of saying, there's a lot there, but the Federal Reserve needs to stop playing God, because it has been an evil God for real wage growth in this country. Go back to one job for the Fed. Just stabilize the dollar, peg it to gold, silver, nickel, agricultural, farm commodities. Peg it to real commodities. And that would actually allow wage growth to occur automatically as opposed to the Federal Reserve tamping it down through their artificial monetary policy. So I believe in getting to the root causes versus the Band-Aids, because if you try to do something else without fixing that underlying problem, wages are not going to go up. They'll stay glued. It's like you put glue on your feet and you stand to the ground. It'll stay still at that rock bottom minimum wage while increasing unemployment as a result.
Yeah, that's like in California, the McDonald's situation.
Yeah.
And so they raised like the Big Macs and all the prices at McDonald's. But I think the minimum wage now is $20 in California.
Yeah, $20.
Yeah, they went up. Yeah.
Yeah,
So like,
Big Mac's $20.
It's not really helping anybody.
It's not
helping
it's not.
anybody.
It's not.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
So people have to pay more out of their pocket for what they otherwise couldn't afford while their feet are still glued to the ground at that minimum base level of minimum wage.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting. I appreciate the economic questions, you guys. You guys are businessmen now.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah.
Is it? You're running this business together.
Yeah, pretty
Yes,
much.
sir. Definitely.
All
Right? So
Yeah.
you kind of as you scale this one day, you already are. I mean, you'll understand the basic concepts that most politicians don't, and I think it's time for, I think, a CEO in the White House. I think a CEO from the next generation.
I agree.
One of the
Definitely.
things is when you guys do your budget for next year, here'd be, I think the way many businesses do this is don't look at last year's budget and then see, oh yeah, well, what do I tweak? No, just ask, what do you actually need on a forward-looking basis next year? Because you can actually look at that with fresh eyes. That's how most businesses run, what you call zero-based budgeting. I mean, it's just like you almost don't even need to use that term. It's just intuitive. Well, the federal government, the problem is that they actually just use last year's broken budget as the baseline and then try to tweak it around the edges. But last year's budget was based on the prior year's budget, and the prior year's budget was based on the prior year's budget.
Yeah.
So you multiply and roll forward the mistakes that they've made in the past. So they have a CEO in the White House, we start with zero-based budgeting. Again, it's a pretty simple concept, something that hasn't happened in our nation's modern history, and that'll change on my watch as well.
Oh yeah, that's definitely needed in the country.
Last question.
Yeah.
This is just another. So it was so impressive to me the fact that you started these companies at such a young age, right?
Yeah.
So how did
Thank
you
you, man.
did you start it in college? Like, were you still in college?
Well, I started my first business actually when I was in college. It was a pretty small one, but it was a small success. We raised a little bit amount of angel capital. They made a little bit of money. We sold the business. It was actually a website that allowed young entrepreneurs to access capital and other resources using the internet, but before that was sort of a novel idea. And so, my business partner and I, we actually ended up working together in other projects later on in my career. But then I actually got a job at a hedge fund when I graduated, becoming a biotech investor. Mm-hmm. And that was good, but that allowed me to learn an industry really well, that allowed me to spot an inefficiency in that industry that I then left to found my next company. Exactly, find a need.
And
exactly.
That's so smart.
The best kind of
love that.
entrepreneurs are accidental entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, in some sense, I was asking about your story. Track
Exactly.
season,
Yeah.
COVID,
Yeah.
you had some time. Great. It's like an accidental entrepreneur, but you're actually more likely to then have filled a need that actually exists rather than to say, I'm going to start something and then find what it is. Well, chances that you find something that some people actually need is low.
Yeah.
So I started this biotech company. I was 28 at the time. And that was a substantial company. My first college business was tiny. But yeah, I mean, I think you don't know for sure if it's going to succeed when you set out. Even if it does succeed, it's never going to look like what you imagined on day one.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you're Christopher Columbus setting on voyage,
Keep going.
just you don't know what's on the other side, but you're going to keep going and you're going to persevere until you finally achieve your version of success. And that's been, for the multiple businesses I've been built since then, that's been the formula. Some of them are relatively more recent. Others, Roivant, the first business I founded, is, by next May will be 10 years old. And, time, I'm proud to see what they've accomplished. And now I'm not even part of the business. It gives me, I'm the kind of person where I'm most satisfied when I see something that I helped start live without me. Because then it feels like you've actually made a contribution that's going to outlive you. And that's, hopefully that's the feeling I have when we leave the White House in January 2033 after 2 terms.
I think
that's what we want to say is this will be a country whose best days are still far ahead of me.
Yeah.
And that's the spirit with which we're approaching this.
That's beautiful, man.
That's great.
We got a couple
Thank you.
minutes, but we planned on doing a little reaction, but we'll do it next time. We'll do a reaction with
next
Vivek.
time.
That'll be fun.
Okay.
But we can just break down kind of some things that
We
Thomas
can't
said.
do it now. I don't know. We don't have time.
We could. I mean, we could.
A quick one. I think it'd be kind of fun.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we're here. I don't know when we're going to be together.
Yeah. So Thomas Sowell, that was the awakening. I would
No,
say
that was
Oh,
a big,
definitely.
that was a
one of
milestone
them.
for me.
One of them.
Yeah.
Definitely.
He's awesome.
We
I mean,
used
he's a hero.
Yeah. So we used to, especially me, I used to think a lot. Like, I got a lot of my ideas and stuff like from Twitter, and I was easily influenced. And I think a lot different now than I did then. And people like you and Thomas Sowell and people like that were kind of like awakened me. Like now
I
I
appreciate
feel
that,
like
man.
I'm actually woke now.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I thought I was woke,
awaken.
but
Yeah,
I was asleep.
Yeah, and that's the whole. I mean, that's life. I think in my experiences, it's always a constant reawakening, and you're challenging your. It's not a one-time event.
Yeah.
Right. You're always iteratively waking up to new reality, and
That's
so
growing and learning.
yeah, exactly. I don't think that. I mean, eventually, if you're Jesus Christ or Buddha or whatever, you'll eventually be the all-knowing.
Yeah, then
But most of us are not that,
We're not,
right?
yeah,
and so
that's
it's a
not gonna happen for us.
constantly iterative process of
Screen record on?
Yeah.
When I grew up in Harlem in the 40s and 50s, I never heard a gunshot.
That's crazy.
Well, let me read what you say in your preface. You say, "Let me state here, and now that these essays that these essays do not mean, 1, all Southern whites were or are rednecks, 2, all black Americans today or in the past were or are black rednecks. One cannot predict, you write, much less forestall all the clever misinterpretations that others might put on one's words. The most that can be done is to alert honest people to the problem. Black rednecks, who are they?
These would be blacks who came out of the Southern culture and who carried that culture with them north into the urban ghettos and into the ghettos of the South for that matter. And who have not moved out of that culture since. Over the years, both blacks and whites have moved away from that culture. But in the poorest and worst of the ghetto areas, there are lots of people who have not. And these kinds of, it's a culture which didn't do whites any good, and it's certainly not doing blacks any good today. And the tragedy is that people regard this culture as somehow the authentic black culture, and therefore you're not to interfere with it.
I'm proud to be a bartender. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
I don't feel no ways tired.
Oh my God.
That was very painful to hear.
That was crazy.
Where I started from.
Black English is considered not quite proper English. On the other hand, if blacks happen to have all the power and own all the corporations and whites were working for them, it would be the other way around.
That was
There was
crazy.
a period, I'm trying to remember now, I believe it was in the mid-70s when substandard English began to become
Yes.
began to become viewed as a discipline of it.
Okay, so in today's society, like our culture, it is looked at as like it's bad, pretty much. So when we like do the videos that we're doing, and like it's just crazy stuff, like the Vegas situation that happened, with the 15 kids that end up jumping that white kid, we're looked at as like a wild culture, pretty much, like where other people don't want to be around our culture. So I'm trying to figure out like how could we fix that in America? Like,
Well, what do you think, man?
man, we came up with so many conclusions. Because it's like, okay, in was it Philadelphia? These riots are happening. These kids are running in stores and stuff like that. And I don't know how to fix it. I think that we could. It seems like, okay, the Democrats would be like, okay, let's fund, their parents so that maybe they can have money and stuff like that. I think it truly is the money, but sometimes I think it's not the money.
I don't think it's the money.
So like, what can we do? Is it crime? Like, can we put them in jail?
Last time we interviewed him, he said it starts in the home.
Yeah, I got two things for you.
And I think that's the biggest thing.
I think family and education.
It is.
That's the answer. So, I think that if take the black, white, Asian filter off. Just take all of the filters off, okay? Forget what color you are. If you grow up in a fatherless household, or a single-parent household, period, but it's almost always fatherless one, you are 8 times more likely to end up in jail, even more likely to end up in poverty, less likely to graduate from high school with a degree, etc. Well, now then if you want to put the racial filters back on, that actually explains a big part of the difference in racial disparities. Because I think in black households, and the numbers vary on this, but it could be around like 40%, 42%.
Yes.
In Asian households, you're talking about in the single digits.
Wow.
So it's not that there's some other explanation. I mean, this explanation accounts for it. Now, a lot of that's the government's fault. People say, are you blaming black people for that? No. I'm actually blaming policies that were supposedly created to help black people under Lyndon Johnson in the 1960s, the so-called Great Society, that started paying people and giving financial incentives to grow up in single-parent households. And the sad truth is actually the black, and actually of all races for that matter, single-parent household rates was far lower in the 1950s than it is today.
Crazy.
Now, does that mean just because you grow up in a single-parent household that you're destined for failure? Of course not. No. But that doesn't mean that should be the model that we pay for and wish for everybody either. And the other thing is education, where it's easy to say math is racist, right? If whatever, certain races are not doing as well as other races in math. Well, look at why. The inner city public schools, where a disproportionate number of black people live in the cities as opposed to suburbs compared to other races, are doing a much poorer job of educating students. They're the ones that shut down. So I went to actually use my own home city as an example. So I went to public schools through 8th grade. I went to a school called St. X High School in Cincinnati for high school. The Cincinnati public schools, like in the inner city of Cincinnati, they were closed for a full year and then some.
Whoa.
The high school that I went to was closed for 4 days during COVID.
Wow.
So it's interesting how COVID only affects the public school teachers,
Yeah, definitely.
but not private school teachers.
They don't get sick at private
Yeah,
school.
apparently COVID it's a great form
It
of immunity.
chooses, yeah.
You have natural immunity if you go to
Yeah.
private school. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think that the answer begins. I don't think it's a money question until you've solved the other underlying structural failures of. I think the nuclear family is inherently good. That doesn't mean that every kid gets to grow up in it and whatever, but all else equal, it's a good baseline for a society to assume that having two parents in the house with a stable household upbringing, which is a great privilege and head start that I had. I mean, there's no bigger head start that I could have had than that. And then education where no matter where you live, no matter what your zip code, you get to send your kids to the best possible school. Mm-hmm. That's the civil rights issue of our time, actually. And so that I think is, I think is the answer, not blaming some cultural failure or some racism or anything else. Some people say blame black culture, some people blame racism. None of that. Family and education.
I like
that's
that.
the answer.
Yeah, that's very logical.
And then, okay, very last question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, whenever the first time we saw you was the Don Lemon video, right? And he tried to use his final Hail Mary against you when you were cooking them was, you're not black, so how can you talk about this? I personally think that is one of the biggest problems in the black culture is the fact that you have to be black to speak on an issue like that. And then we sit there and act so fake offended about something whenever you're saying facts, and he's definitely not heard about what you're saying.
Definitely.
So that's what I think about that.
I mean, it reminds me of Nikki Haley. We were just talking about Nikki Haley, where she's saying because I'm criticizing a woman, that somehow that means that I'm sexist. It's the same thing. And I just reject that. We're all human beings.
Yeah.
We're allowed to disagree on some things. We don't have to agree on everything. But actually, the public school system I went to is majority black or close to it. People don't know that, but turns out a lot of black people disagree with each other on things. A lot of Indian people disagree with each other on things. Yeah. And a lot of white people disagree with each other on things. And so when we reduce ourselves to the genetic attributes, either gender or race or sexuality or whatever, then we're more likely to see each other in that way.
Because you're not treating each other equally. Because if I would argue with him, and then I would argue with you just because of your race or your sex or your color, then I'm treating you differently.
Exactly. And that's what the whole civil rights movement was about, was to make sure that we don't see each other on the color of our skin, but on the content of our character.
Wow.
And so that's what I want to bring back. And, it makes me, it does hurt sometimes where you'll be labeled, are you racist tropes or whatever
we get
for saying
things
this.
and name things.
You gotta find your way past that, and I'm glad we're able to have this kind of conversation with you guys too.
Definitely,
yeah, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your time today.
I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I appreciate it, guys.
Man,
This was awesome. Thank you for coming out here, guys.
Oh,
I appreciate it.
definitely wouldn't miss it.